Now, more stories, insights, and analysis of Illinois policy and politics. This is Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute. Once again, your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Pat Hughes, co-founder of the Illinois Opportunity Project, and this edition of Illinois Rising. And Pat, I haven't seen someone overpay for diminishing assets since the Cubs signed Alfonso Soriano, but the AFL-CIO and a former feudal lord on the city council, Edwin Eisendrath, bought the Chicago Sun-Times or the Chicago Reader this week for $1. Now, of course, that's just to confirm the transaction. As an attorney, you understand this. Commercial attorney, you understand
consideration.
Yeah, right.
And the debt they're going to take on.
Right. The real play, they raised about $11 million from investors to try and operate this dog for a few more months before it runs out of cash yet again. I mean, it's very, I think, appropriate that the Sun-Times, which is like the parent newspaper of the socialist workers, just a big government newspaper, should be in the same financial condition as the big government they defend, which is Chicago and Illinois, meaning they'll be out of cash in 3 months, and they wouldn't even exist without vanity plays from previous well-heeled liberals like Jim Tyree, who got him to the Michael Farrow, who now got him to the AFL-CIO.
Yeah, and the Sun-Times, Dan, they're just like the failed government that they champion, except they don't have the power to tax, so they're running out of time, right? Unlike the Democratic Party in Illinois, who can use union contributions to tax the public to get done what they want to do. Eventually, the market is going to crush the Sun-Times. It's been crushing it for a long, long time, and it'll continue to do that. By the way, it's the world champion Chicago Cubs. When you say Chicago Cubs, you have to say world champion Chicago Cubs. The other thing about this, Dan, that's interesting is, the unions are involved in this.
Can't believe you got Quintana.
The unions, I know, it's great. The unions are into, into this. They're part of this. And if they're right, or someone from the right was influential in the media, or whenever they're influential in the media, buying up media properties or whatever, there's this giant hue and cry about how there's not going to be any fairness in this, and this is just the Kochs or Fox News or whoever on the right.
Well, that's the point that Kristen McQuarrie from the Chicago Tribune made about Sinclair Media. When Sinclair Media bought some Tribune properties, GN and whatnot, right-wing media takeover. But when Jorge Ramirez from the Chicago Federation of Labor is sitting in as chairman of the board of the Sun-Times, no problem there. So, of course, it's hypocrisy. But the great thing about this, too, is it's revelatory, right? So why is there no hue and cry? Because the Sun-Times was already doing the bidding of big labor and the political class in this city and state. So why not just formalize the relationship and have the big labor and the political class own the Sun-Times? Now you got it.
You can see them sitting around the table saying, well, what are we going to do? The Sun-Times is going out of business, and they're our biggest champion. Well, what should we do? Well, let's just buy them, and then we'll just perpetuate it, and then we'll have this sort of what looks like an independent source saying good things about us, and this is the only way that they can be saved. That's what this is.
Well, right. It's the brand equity that they're really buying, and the ability to use the Sun-Times as a propaganda tool to advance their interests, to advance their candidates. Nothing changes. I mean, it's not about the content. Nothing will change in the content. You won't notice anything. It'll be the same pap, generally speaking, and the same political propaganda for certain. I mean, look at just who the columnists are and the editorial board. I mean, it's
a clown show. I mean, at least I get to keep reading Sneed, which it's just a disaster. Mary Mitchell and who's that other guy? Mark Brown. It's a disaster.
Yeah.
These people are terrible.
Well, here's the one thing I'll do is give consideration to some of the good journalists that have been through the Sun-Times before. They would never do that in the converse. But, I mean, they have good people there, and I recognize good investigative journalism. I mean, Tim Novak and Steve Wurmber for years. Kristen McQuarrie mentioned when she co-hosted with me this week. Dan Mahopoulos, he's a good journalist.
Yeah, I like Dan.
So they have good journalists there that write good stories. I'm not disputing that.
Some of the sports is good.
But in terms of, and over the years, that's certainly been the case. But it's also been the case that they have been a flack for every bad decision and every bad decision maker in this city and in this state for the better part of the last, certainly 50 years, but probably going back before then. And so, and they bear no culpability. And they also pretend that they are, the objective scriveners of the passing scene rather than interested parties trying to advance a policy agenda, which is what they're really doing. And that largely bleeds into the newsroom, too, because they're people that are fellow travelers of the left. That's just what it is. Again, separating out some of the good journalists, because I can make distinctions. Scott Fornick, who used to be a political reporter, is now an editor there. I think he's a Democrat. I don't care. He does a nice job. He's a professional. So there are professionals there. But in terms of the ideological leadership of that paper, and then pretending there is an ideological leadership. At least Eisendrath isn't pretending. One of the new principals saying this is a newspaper for the 99%. So he's just going to take the DNC talking points and essentially amplify them to the extent that a newspaper that's got a couple hundred subscribers can amplify those messages.
Yeah, and this is the MSNBC model too, right, Dan? They're the MSNBC of Chicago newspapers. They want to target. Their model is failing. So in order for them to have eyeballs, they have to really get concentrated on who their target market is. It's like a niche market of leftists. And that's what they're trying to do, and that's what they're trying to attack. And it's the only way for them to think that they'll survive. In the long run, they will not survive.
And I love getting attacked because I've made some snarky comments about the Sun-Times and about these leftists. And so I get attacked on Twitter and elsewhere by the Chicago Tribune reporter or a Daily Herald reporter. They're just wounded pack animals in their death throes. And they know that, and that's fine. But it is worth noting, just something to consider next time you see those people taking shots at the community newspapers I started, where I'm open and notorious about my worldview, and just say, judge us based on the content, but they won't. They're just, everything's fake news because we disagree with it. Everything's fake news because I'm the publisher, or the Illinois News Network, which is an Illinois Policy Institute entity, or the Illinois Radio Network, which the Illinois Policy Institute bought. That everything's fake news because we disagree with the worldview of the ownership or the publisher. So that's all fake news to be dismissed out of hand. We don't have to assess the content. But here we are supposed to take everything the Sun-Times does at face value because they have no political agenda. So that's the hypocrisy, and that's why you can't have important discussions about salient issues in this city and state. And it's part of the reason why you have this city and state as the worst governed major city and the worst governed state in America today, and in America since its founding, at least at the state level, because you have a fourth estate that is beholden to the government rather than a check on big government.